Hello, my name's Niranjan, the host of Master of Your Crafts podcast. Learning from leaders who are continuously inspired, passionate, and driven to align with their soul purpose, sharing their gifts to bring healing to others. The music is composed by Rebecca Everett. Today is episode number 34, and I'll be talking to Paul Klein, the founder of Impakt, a globally recognized authority on social purpose of business. He has collaborated with organizations including 3M, McCain Foods, Petro-Canada, Starbucks, and GoodLife Fitness to help solve social problems and benefit from doing so. Paul is also the founder of Impakt Foundation for Social Change, a charitable organization with a mission to create pathways to employment for people in need. He has also written extensively about business and social change in publications including Advertising Age, Forbes, the Global Mail, The Guardian, and the Stanford Social Innovation Review. Paul is currently writing a book called Change for Good, which will be published in 2022 by the ECW Press. So hello and welcome to Paul. How are you, Paul?
I'm extremely well, but thank you for asking.
You're very welcome. I'm excited to have you on this podcast because your profile and all that you have done brings more curiosity for me in what you've done and what you drive and possibly inspire to do further in about making social change possibly a normal part of day-to-day life, especially in this pivotal time where social in itself has been such a challenge since last year, and the push that we have with change. So would you like to share a little bit more about what got you into this space of social change?
Well, it's a long story, but I have to kind of pinpoint aside from growing up in a household where social change and social justice were very just kind of part of the deal, and that was part of what was important to my parents. And so I always grew up with that, and always grew up with, various things in the house. I remember the first thing I can remember was that there was a labor problem with, grape pickers in California. And Cesar Chavez, one of the great labor leaders, was at a huge protest around North America to encourage people to not buy grapes from California, And I was probably like 8 or something. But so I just remember that vividly. My mother was not going to buy any of those grapes, from California because of the way the grape growers were treated there. So I had that, kind of sensibility, I suppose. But then, strangely enough, I had also been involved in music a lot, and as a musician, but then ended up for a while working at the Toronto Symphony. And I went to a conference in the late 1980s in Chicago that was for all these different symphony orchestra folks. And the keynote speaker at the conference was Ben Cohen from Ben & Jerry's Ice Cream. He started talking about how businesses could have a social purpose. And then he passed out these ice cream bars called Peace Pops. They had this campaign called 1% for Peace, and some amount of what you paid for it went to this campaign. And that was the first time I'd ever heard of anything. Aside from stuff my parents were involved in, that was the first kind of business campaign or commitment to social change that I had heard of. And I just remember, I didn't know anything really more than that, but it was like just something went off, and I remember thinking that's what I would like to do. like somehow I would like to work with businesses and to help them make social change, even though that, there was nobody doing that. I barely knew what it meant. And, I was like nowhere. But I was just really taken with it. It was like a big idea. That was really the thing that I think, when I really think about it, it was one of the most important things, inspirations for me, seeing that.
Beautiful. And how beautifully that it uncovered in that way, it translated in a way that led you from one creative space of music to another creative space going, I don't know what this looks like, but let's see.
Yeah, and I think that's been interesting. It's interesting to think about it that way. Like everything that happened to me was kind of accidental rather than being planned. I really didn't have other than the only thing I knew is that I was kind of, reasonably good at was playing guitar. And I thought, well, that's what I'll do. I didn't ever think about anything, how that would play out or how that would be practical. Nor did my parents ever say anything to me, like maybe you should think about doing something that, you're going to need to make money someday or something.
Right.
Never came up, so I never had that. And so, but I did have this, kind of serendipity, good fortune to be falling into these things that had a creative dimension to them, because I didn't really have any business skill. Like I didn't go to business school. I didn't do any of those things. Yet I was in situations where that was really, everyone around me had that. Right. This world of businesses contributing to social change. As I said, I didn't really know how businesses worked, but I had much more of a clear understanding of the social change world. But nobody in businesses knew how this worked either. I was able to be kind of creative, I guess, because of that,
Yeah.
I'm just making it up. I'm still making it up, honestly.
I was going to say, isn't that part of life that we have right now? Sometimes we just have to just go with the flow with what that looks like.
Well, I think so. And, especially now, more and more, I think that we're all in a situation where there's no certainty anyway. Like it used to be in the old days, you'd have a job and that would be pretty dependable. And, there's a degree of certainty around that. And there's any certainty that people have now is like an illusion. Yeah. So on the one hand, that's difficult, for a lot of people. On the other hand, I always try and look at the positives, and I always think, okay, where's the opportunity here? And it does create an opportunity for people to invent things, Yeah. And why not do that? Because there's nothing else that's certain anyway. So you might as well lean into what it is that you're all about.
That's right. What do you believe about yourself? And do you feel it defines who you are as a person and connects you with your calling?
I don't know. I feel like the things I know, some of the things I have experienced about myself is I've been through a lot of very difficult things, so I think I'm quite resilient. I don't take things in too much, I'm definitely driven by curiosity and creativity and invention. That's for sure. And then the irony is sometimes you think, oh man, I wish I had some sort of more stable thing going on. But I know that I'd hate that. I could be terrible in that situation. So I'm pretty comfortable mostly with not having anything like that. I don't know. I feel like I've been through enough situations where, there's been nothing there and you've had to create something. And somehow you just do it. I don't know. It's like I'm always in situations where, you're thinking, okay, well, I've got to do something, some project we're working on or something. There's nothing there. There's no example. There's nothing you can turn to and say, okay, I could take this off that shelf and just put it in here.
Yeah.
And then you realize, well, I guess we're back to just having to make it up.
Yeah.
Which is the kind of through line to all this stuff, But I think that it's something that is not just me. I've been doing that for some time, but I think that's really what the common denominator we all have is now.
Mm-hmm. So there is an additional cause of action that will amplify that change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the action part of it you mentioned is really, really important, and I think that's always, in my experience, that's such an important thing, and to make people feel empowered and make people feel like inspired as well. Like it's actually not, there's lots of talking about things,
Mm-hmm.
and not enough doing the thing. I've done more than the talking about it. I've actually been crazy enough to actually try and do these things.
Yeah.
It's not like it's been very successful all the time, but that doesn't matter.
That's right. It's the attempt and seeing what works and what doesn't, because it doesn't mean it's going to work the first time around, because there's many lessons in between, right, that we need to learn in order to make it not perfect, but have it successful in a form of fashion. And it might take second, third, fourth, fifth, double-digit times round to get to that outcome.
For sure. I've said, I think I was mentioning before, I just finished writing this book about business and social change called Change for Good. And in this sort of a retrospective, in a way, of the various experiences I've had over, 20 years since I started Impakt, it actually occurred to me when I was writing this that there are not that many examples of things that really work that well. A small number of things actually worked in the way that, at least in the way that I had expected they might. Right. Most things were not that, for various reasons. I realize that's not a bad thing. It's definitely, a quality more than quantity situation.
Absolutely. And it's a certain personality, as we talked about earlier, or attributes that individual carries, who are okay being uncomfortable, or who are okay going with the unknown, or with a specific outcome in mind. It takes a specific individual. So then with that, what do you feel is your intention, other than the obvious, is to create change for good in the craft that you have harnessed of, I want to say, creating opportunities and supporting and guiding organizations and individuals to be more mindful in their position and in their way of living and being? Is there another intention behind it? And how has that shifted from when you originally started some years ago to where you are now? Now you've written your book.
I feel like some of the ways I was doing this originally I wasn't thinking about this. I was just doing it, but now I realize there's a few themes that things are important to me that I was doing then, but I hadn't thought about, but maybe and are still important now. Like I feel like empathy and listening is just a really important part of the work that I do, and it's an important part to me as a person. And one of the things that is in the social change work, which is super important, which is hardly ever happens, is that you've got to spend the time, if you're interested in helping to motivate some social change, whether it's, I've done a lot of work in the homelessness area, you actually have to spend time with people who are homeless. You've got to listen to them because they know the answers and they've experienced it. It's impossible if you haven't had that to had those experiences. You just can't do it. It just becomes, but mostly the way businesses do this, in our experience, is that you have people sitting in highly educated, very well paid people sitting in boardrooms trying to make decisions about social issues they've never experienced.
Right.
No surprise, it doesn't work very well.
Absolutely.
So the listening part of it is important. I feel like I related to that. I think that the whole idea of collaborating and partnering and having a kind of a level playing field, in co-creating things is really important. Again, to me, that's a part of the business approach that we have, but it's also just personally, that's kind of who I am. I'm not very confrontational person. I don't really want that. I would much rather work together with people, and without any kind of ego, interest in, I'm kind of drawn to risk because it's, once you've experienced something, like that, it's kind of appealing in a way, and getting into something that's very bold and also very risky. There's a certain there's a real energy to that,
Yeah.
If you don't know where it's going. I mean, I don't know. I've just finished writing this book. I have no clue. I mean, maybe it could be awful, but I have spent a lot of time at that over the last number of months. Before, I used to think a little bit more about, what would happen if things didn't work out well. Like I don't, and now, with this book as an example, I don't really care. Like I was just rereading a lot of it in the last couple of days, and there are all kinds of things, parts I don't really like, but I was thinking, well, it does sound like something I would say, though. It sounded like me.
Right.
I feel like also that one of the things that I've really enjoyed in the work that we've done, and I've tried to do, is that is different than working with kind of within a bigger structure, more conventional thing, is that it's just the opportunity to be yourself and have your own voice. That's a very empowering thing, and I think it's hard for people who are working, very structured situation with other people sometimes, because then you've got to be speaking in their voice.
Yes.
So you're kind of living their purpose,
Yes.
And I feel like I want to live my purpose, and I feel like more people, once they have had that experience, I think that's very empowering.
It is empowering enough to nudge you into a space of the unknown and being okay with it and figuring it out as you go, even after many years later. It's
For
being
sure.
okay with it. Yeah.
If you're in a kind of predictable place, either personally or professionally or anything else, you only know what will happen if you don't do something different. You just got more of the same.
Absolutely.
So, when I think about it in that way, I think, well, what's the downside of just doing what you think is right for you? Because it's also, I find that, and not just me, but the people I've see who do this and people who inspire me, it's so clear that when you're in a zone like that, you're happy. If you're happier, you're doing stuff usually better than you would otherwise, and treating people around you better than you would otherwise, and all that stuff, So it all goes together. And the problem is that too few people have that. That's why one of the reasons why things are so difficult in the world right now is because so many people don't have that.
What do you feel are some of the positive outcomes that you've seen with all the organizations you've worked for under Impakt that have led you to reaffirming your mission, if you will?
I think there's two levels of things. One is get out in the world, and then there's the experience of the people who you're working with, who are helping to make that happen. So we launched in last year an amazing initiative, and we collaborated with Petro-Canada actually to create a national program that is really addressing the needs of caregivers across Canada. This is an area that's informal caregiving is an area that's hugely important. Mostly everyone is having at some point in their lives to help their parents or their kids or their neighbors or whatever. And yet these people are kind of unsung heroes, Yes. And so we created this whole thing. They had a lot of horsepower behind it. It launched. There's a new foundation called the Caremakers Foundation. That kind of scale of program doesn't happen very often. But to me, as important as creating that is the experience of doing that, and the people there, the combination of people that came together to make this happen over a year and a half or so. It was just very, and working with our own team, it was just really amazing. Thinking about other things, that we created this thing called Higher Up, which is a platform to connect youth who've experienced homelessness with entry-level employment. And nothing like that had been done before. Sort of a big idea out of the gate that it became incredibly difficult along the way, and in the end did not work nearly as well as we thought it might. But the people who were involved in making this happen were amazing. I'll never forget that. And we actually almost went bankrupt as a result of trying to do this in the wrong way. But I remember thinking at the time after it launched, I thought, well, if nothing else ever happened, like if I literally did not do anything else after this, if it all stopped here, I wouldn't feel bad about that. I'd feel like, well, that's where that was worth doing.
Absolutely.
You know,
yeah.
And in part because of what it was, and in part because of the people who are involved. So.
And I think it's also the intention that you put behind it is to be ruffle some feathers for the norm of society that's kind of put out and shake that basket, if you will, a little bit to see how else can we do this.
Well, I think that's true. I think that's a really, I love what you said. And I think that I found that when you shift the narrative to declaring from asking a question to declaring what you want to do, it really changes things. You know, like when we had, just going back to that Higher Up piece, when we started saying, well, it wasn't saying, you know, well, got this idea to create this platform, you know, connect youth who are homeless to who might be employed to these jobs in big companies. And you think that's a good idea, or, you know, would you support that in some way? I was saying, we have a big idea to connect youth who experience homelessness to employment, and we're going to do it. And it's not a question of if we're going to, it's just a question of how and with who.
Nice.
And that kind of thinking really changes the narrative.
Similar to a saying of, you don't know what you don't know. Right? It reminds me of that, of you got to travel that path, travel that route to get an outcome, to see where it's going to lead you, because you just never know. And especially from what you're sharing, a lot of the path and a lot of the roads that you've traveled have been unknown, have not been known. So there is no model to mimic in that sense at all.
No, exactly. You think about Steve Jobs at Apple. They never did any market research. What were people going to say about something they never even heard of before?
Absolutely.
I mean, no way. You know, it's a whole different level of, you know, vision and creativity. For me, invention has always been very, very interesting to me, you know, and improvisation. And the improvisation came probably because, in part because of my experience as a musician. When you're really in a certain kind of not, except if you're a classical musician, it's all written down, you've got to play it in that way. But the kind of music that I was involved in, and a lot of people do, is you don't have that. There's no foundation to it. You know, a little bit, there's a structure, but then there's a lot of things that it, so it's just up to you.
That's right.
And so I feel like that experience sort of still lives with me, you know.
You said early on that when you got into this space, there weren't many companies, individuals, organizations that you could kind of not collaborate with, but align with to give you that process, that step, that structure. So once you found these individuals and people, did it refuel you? Did it give you hope? Like, where did that lead you in your own pursuit in continuation of this?
In what I do, because it's kind of business, but not business, you know, like it's, a lawyer or an accountant or something. It's very, very clear what they do and what their value is, and is about the connections with the people, that you're working with. And I could tell, like, within a few minutes, usually, in speaking with somebody, whether there's ever even close to being a possibility that we're going to be working together, because some people are, and I'm not a criticism in any way. There's a certain kind of chemistry or way of looking at the world that is different. I find the people who we work with, clients and collaborators in businesses, tend to themselves, if they're working in this area, they tend to be a little bit different. They're working in the social change space within a corporation or a nonprofit organization. You just get a different kind of sensibility. So it's very often that's the case.
Yes.
You're kind of with a little bit of people who are a little bit out of the ordinary anyway.
Right. Right.
And that really appeals to me. Combined with a lot of just really, really good fortune of being able to be associated with people and projects that were incredible over a couple of years. Something called the Taylor Project. This man I know who's just an incredible story. This man who was a business mentor of mine for many years, named Larry Enkin, over 20 years as a mentor. A couple of years ago, told me the story about his father. And after the Second World War, turns out his father had been the architect of a program that is called the Taylor Project, which his father owned a very large garment business. He collaborated with a number of other leaders in the garment industry at that time, bring Holocaust survivors who had been in displaced persons camps to Canada to work in the garment industry. So they were rescued from this horrible conditions of the DP camps to come to Canada as refugees but to give them work here as tailors. Some of them were tailors already. Some of them pretended to be tailors. And in the end, about 2,500 people came to Canada, and which is a story that I had never heard of before. Almost nobody else had. But he said, "Do you think that you can help me bring this story to life? Who were the tailors? What happened to them? Maybe we could write a book, something." And so, I was like, "Well, I don't know, how are we going to find out? But in the end, it was, we did, and it was one of the most special things, maybe the most special thing I've ever been involved in. There's a book called The Taylor Project, which was published last October.
Beautiful.
With the stories of these people. There's a documentary film which is going to be made about this. And then we also, just had the incredible opportunity to meet some of these people, hear their stories. And then I had also the relationship I had with this man, Larry, which was, as I said, I'd known him for a long time. It just got that much better because we were spending so much time together on this Taylor Project. And he's in his 90s now. Like, it was great because I think it really something that had been important to him and his family. We helped to work together to bring this to life. It was very meaningful to a lot of the families themselves. These Taylor Project families are who people who are still alive or their children. That takes this work to a whole different level.
What a beautiful opportunity to be part of an enriched story that is so alive within this man's life and now being passed on and shared with you to share with me today and with everybody else who I connect with, because it's a beautiful inspiration that really shows the power of connection and the power of intending to make a change from a heart space.
Very much so. And that was the same thing those people had in 1948. They got together and they said, we've got to do something about these people who are languishing in these DP camps after having been in concentration camps, a lot of them. And and that led to us last year, our own charitable organization called the Impakt Foundation for Social Change.
Right.
And that's also very special to me. It builds off what we learned in the Taylor Project, has a focus on creating employment for people in need, and has a particular focus on refugees and newcomers to Canada in a similar way that the Taylor Project did in 1948, kind of applying some of the lessons and learning from that project to the situation as it is today for refugees and newcomers. It's become more intentional, but it was sort of accidental some before. But where we've got this situation where we're helping businesses to do a better job at this, but we're doing this from a place of direct experience. Like we're not just saying, well, I think you should do this. We're actually doing it too. Like we're walking the talk and have had this experience of actually, we've created some of these social change programs we've created are bigger or more impactful than the things that we've done for our corporate clients. And it's a great opportunity to learn from, each side of this, That's been a kind of unusual part of our work in the last number of years. Is as we've gotten more involved in these large scale corporate social change programs, we've also gotten more involved in creating our own programs.
How do you feel some of the outcomes or challenges that were presented in 1948 from that project, do they mimic and reflect the same elements of what's going on today?
Oh, it's exactly the same. A lot of the things, yes. So people are coming to Canada. People came to Canada then, as they do now, with no money, no language, no English language skills, no understanding of the culture, nowhere to live, no job, often without their full families. So they don't have the support of that. So there are many of the things that are the same. And one of the big differences, though, is that in terms of the pure numbers, there are far, far more people in that situation today than there were after the Second World War. There are far more displaced people around the world. I believe it's 86 million or so, according to the UN. And relatively speaking, compared to the number as it was after the Second World War, it's much bigger. It's bigger in absolute terms and relative terms. So, and a lot of those people are, don't have work, and we believe that meaningful jobs are one of the most important foundations for helping people rebuild their lives.
Absolutely.
And the other thing, of course, which I didn't mention, which is very similar, is that these are people who've been through trauma mostly. That was certainly the case after the war, and it is the case now. People coming here from Syria or other countries that are places of usually people are leaving, their homes because their places have become places of conflict.
Right. Yes.
I can tell you, both in having experienced speaking directly to people who've been through the Holocaust, and now speaking to people who've been through trauma more recently, it takes the work that we do into a very real place. It's not abstract. It's not sitting in a boardroom talking about, this stuff. It's actually, you get to a very different kind of understanding when you're actually having the experience of speaking with people directly, and seeing where they live, and then, also helping to tell their stories. And then in the case of the work we're doing now, also helping to create employment.
Yes. Powerful stuff. Powerful experiences to impact individuals. I want to say on a pretty profound level, offering them a safe place to land so they can rebuild who they are in whatever form or function that looks like. But I think the real nugget is with intention and with purpose, so they can have fulfillment.
Yes, exactly. And when you do that, I think that's the other thing, is if you're in a situation where you're creating some fulfillment and just supporting other people, then of course that feels especially good personally as well.
Absolutely, yes.
The more you give back and listen, and the more it's about somebody else, the better it is for you.
So having gone to that conference, if you will, in Chicago, and listening to that speaker from Ben Cohen, and being seated with that different concept, and fast forwarding now to all you have achieved, what's next in this process for you? How else do you envision the next phase of this looking like for you?
I really don't know. I mean, it's like at our firm Impakt, people are always saying, well, where's the plan? We've got to have a plan.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very hard to have a plan when you're doing something that's kind of different. I've got a really good friend, John Packer, who always says, like if there was a button to push that, can figure this out easily, we would have already pushed the button,
Okay.
There's no button,
Okay.
And so I don't have a plan. I just, hopefully I can continue to have the opportunity to be involved in things that are inspiring, as I've had the chance to be already,
Mm-hmm.
Looking forward to this book being published. What that means, I don't know. I'm in a very fortunate situation where there's nothing that I'm very happy with everything that's going on. So I don't feel like things need to be too much different, at a certain level. But I don't know what that's going to look like.
That sounds very much the crux of the conversation that we've had, of sitting with the unknown and sitting with not a preempted outcome. That makes complete sense. I'm excited to hear more about the Taylor Project, so I will definitely be looking at that. As to your book, because I'm intrigued to learn a little bit more of your own experiences and what led you into that, and how maybe it's an installation piece for all the other people in the world, I guess, who want to create a change, especially having been through a year and some of COVID, where it's kind of forced upon us. But how can we take control of it a little bit and direct it in a fashion and in a way that's going to be more empowering for the individuals involved, rather than disempowering?
Yeah, well, I think there's no time, like a lot of other things as a result of COVID, I think it's created an opportunity to do things differently, and whether that's a business or personally or anything else, that we haven't seen before. And I feel like actually, it's like there's been a number of big things that have led up to this kind of moment, where this change for good moment, or if you want to call it that, and COVID, and Mr. Trump, and Black Lives Matter, and there's a number of these huge things that have all contributed to, I think, to people realizing that the world is not as good as it needs to be, and then so there's an opportunity to make change in a way that and for people to be involved directly in a way that maybe they weren't before.
Yes. Yeah.
It's kind of passive before, but I think it's gotten to the point where it's, in certain cases, so important that people take action, and the ways in which people can do that are now so possible that I'm very, it's a very depressing time, and a time of opportunity.
I am so grateful that you shared so many nuggets of wisdom of all that you have learned, and all that would hopefully inspire other people who listen to this podcast and take them on a journey of being a little bit different is just okay.
Totally.
Thank you so much, Paul.
It's a pleasure. Take care.
Thank you. I'm Naranjan, and you've been listening to Master of Your Crafts podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and review, and join me next week for another episode. Thank you for listening.